Our guest today uses the ancient wisdoms of yoga therapy, Ayurveda, nutrition and body therapies to provide treatments for many types of chronic diseases and modern-day ills, including stress, depression and anxiety. Yoga therapist Vandana Steadman is committed to using yoga and diet to bring the body and mind back into alignment. Vandana has had her own life-threatening health challenges, so she knows about the road back to recovery and the importance of personal responsibility when it comes to both our mental and physical health. Well, Vandana, welcome to Take It From Us. This is, in fact, your first radio interview.
It is indeed. Thank you very much, Sheldon, for having me here.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about your road, if you like, to becoming a yoga therapist. Where did all this start?
Well, it started over 12 years ago officially, and I went into yoga from a physical aspect of doing all those bending and stretching that we now know it to be. And to my surprise, it was a very small component, and the bigger component is all actually the wellness aspect of the mind and how to integrate your wisdom and then to use the body in a health way rather than bending and stretching. Jumped into yoga in its therapeutic aspect in 2010, where I saw the stresses that I got placed in, and yoga's helped me to manage those lifestyle kind of environment that we have in our corporate space, and it's kept me balanced. Well, I've seen a lot of people where they're in that corporate space but cannot find the balance, too many stresses. So that's my background. So I now look at, even my research paper as I was studying was on burnout, corporate burnout, and applying the yogic principles were able to be more sustaining to come back to health than any other things that was that we found that would help. So much more longer, much more effective, and it's more of a lifestyle approach.
And of course, the wonderful thing about it is that it's a natural approach. It's not a pharmaceutical approach, is it? Where, often when we are caught up in the corporate life and the threat of burnout, we go to our GP and he prescribes antidepressants and Valium and, all those sorts of things, which aren't necessarily good for our well-being over a long-term time.
That's correct. Well, our whole body is a pharmaceutical environment. If we know which kind of meridians to move, which kind of poses to do, or breathing technique, we can bring all those chemical imbalances into alignment very naturally.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I've learned from doing meditation and mindfulness is that I'm quite convinced that those practices reduce the toxins, the poisons, if you like, and I'm sure that brings about great benefits.
Oh, look, meditation is absolutely fantastic. In this environment of meditation, your brain chemicals are in harmony. So you're not left brain or right brain. So when we are more right-brained, we are in stress, fight and flight. And that in itself will flood the body with lots of adrenal hormones that has repercussions. So when you come to center in meditation, you're coming into harmony inside the body. And you can, with meditation, you're generally taking yourself out of what's affecting you. So you're able to have a good perspective of whether I need to get involved in this emotion, whether it's still valid, and make conscious choices. That's where the changes happen.
Well, I have to admit to having enjoyed a session with Vandana yesterday, what was called a Sunday Restore, and I went there quite exhausted, quite achy, and came away re-energised after a session of 2.5 hours, which I'd have to say goes so rapidly, and it is such a peaceful and calming and beneficial practice. So, I was at Vandana's Yoga Therapy Centre in Onawa Road, that's right, Onawa Road. Yes, yesterday, so that was a wonderful experience. I mean, I understand, Vandana, that you have some concerns about the perceptions that some people may have about yoga. And I guess my perception was that it's sort of seen as an energetic thing. You've got to be supple and you've got to be able to turn your body around and bend it all sorts of places. But it's not like that, is it?
No, that's we're very far off the mark, really. And that is just the way that the climate is in the West. It's portrayed that way. So when we say the word yoga, immediately our minds would have this slender, malleable body. And that's what I went into as well. But when you dig in and you look at where is this in relation to whole yoga, it's only one step out of 8. It's the other 8 that really needs to be known so that we can use the benefits of yoga. So our perception, yes, when we say yoga, everyone would think I need to touch my toes. Well, in fact, by the nature of bending the body in the forward bend, we're actually harmonizing our digestive system. So we're not even thinking about the benefits inside, we're actually external. So,
can I just clarify there, you say that there are sort of 8 parts of yoga, is that what you're saying? And that more physical, touching your toes type yoga is just one part of it, is that, did I understand that correctly?
Absolutely, Sheldon. So there is a framework in which yoga is taught or it's been laid out, and one part is the physical movement of the body, because we live in the body, we need to keep it healthy, and by moving your body in different ways, what we're doing is harmonizing the organs. So that's where the physical aspect comes in. It's number 3 out of the whole 8.
Right.
You've got your step 1 and 2, which is really about our attitude. And that once we have a good attitude in life, we're then harmonizing how we are in relation to people as well as ourselves. And then the physical aspect is 3, and then you've got another 5 other points.
And I guess that covers the mind-body connection, does it, those other 5?
That's right. So the steps 3 and 4, which is the breathing, and the 4 is the breathing, the 3 is the movement of the body, that's actually physical, and then the ability to then be able to pull away. So this is where the mental health comes in, because if we're entrenched in what we've gone through in life that's causing us the stress, it doesn't help us deal with it. So what yoga would say, step 5, is to pull away just slightly. Can you see your scenario in a different light? Can you just move away so the emotions are not so strong? And that's another skill, and that becomes a very important skill for mental health. And then you've got your 6, 7 and 8, what really gets you into the meditative aspect. But as if you're discomfort with your mind, you discomfort with the body, very hard to get to that meditative state to draw in our inner wisdom.
So do I understand that the foundation really of yoga, well, in life generally, is attitude, isn't it? It's what attitude we bring. I mean, what attitude we might have brought today to doing a radio interview.
Absolutely. It's all in the mind. And it's what are we... How do we harmonise together rather than making it too personal? So that in itself is an attitude. So they prescribe 10 attitudes and you only have to follow 1. And the theory is it's like a net. If you follow 1 and you hook yourself into one attitude, it will bring positive effects of the other 10. Just by itself. It's just the nature of law that comes into play. Can
you give us a bit of an insight into what that one attitude is? Because I'm sure many of our listeners would love to know. I mean, you know, changing our attitude is so challenging. I guess I've been in a sort of a somewhat negative attitude most of my life. I've also lived in the future, which has created a lot of fear because I'm always looking to the future. Well, you know, am I going to retain my job? Am I going to get into a relationship? Am I going to be able to buy a house or pay the mortgage? You know, all that sort of attitude is very undermining.
Oh, look, I think we all go through that. And where this comes from is either we're too far in the future and we're projecting so far that it takes us away from the reality of today. Also, some of our decisions today are based on a fear of the past, which is no longer valid, or it's not there anymore, but we've moved on, but it's still held within the mind. And so perhaps one of the components you could use is truthfulness in today. Am I grounded today? Have I got the roof over my head? Am I able to make this decision today based on, regardless of what's happened? And in that you will find contentment. Oh yeah, no, today we're good. That in itself will probably take away some of this anxiety and fear. What you've done there is literally stepped away slightly.
Well, it's about living in the now, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, my mindfulness, not that I'm a great expert on mindfulness, but I do try and practice it each day. I guess that has introduced me to the importance of being in the present and being in the now. Is that the way you live your life?
I have to constantly remind myself. I think we're all in this state of fear or anxiousness, and every now and then I step back and think, right, well, actually, do I need to be fearful of this? Even the radio station.
Right.
Okay, my first one, we conjure up in our minds how it would go, and we can get into a real panic. But if I step back and think, well, I'm just sharing what I know, right, then that fear and anxiety will bring me, come away and I come present. Yeah.
So you describe yourself as a yoga therapist, and I have enjoyed your insights and your expertise as a yoga therapist. But what is yoga therapy? I mean, how can it help, I guess, with our mental and physical health?
So yoga therapy is, the way that I could probably describe it, it's like a clock with all these cogs that work together. And we look at mind and body as two cogs, but the therapy aspect looks at 5. And each one of those cogs needs to work systematically for the whole clock to work properly. And that's the body. So if these cogs are out of place, then the symptoms will show through in the mind, body, or an illness of some kind. So yoga would look at more than just the mind and body. And then we will also say, so you've got your energy body as well. So if you're depleted nutritionally or just exhausted, that would affect the mind and body. The ability to move away and observe is your wisdom. So that's a wisdom body, the wisdom aspect of you. And the other part of the 5th cog is a level of being okay now. It's okay. Things might not be okay, but it's okay now. That level of contentment or joy and acceptance.
Acceptance, yeah.
And then when you can what we do with therapy, so we would look at these 5 cogs saying, what is out of place? Which one? Which one do we need to tweak? And we would utilise then either a physical movement, like a posture. We'd use a specific breathing technique. It could be a body therapy. It could be simply someone having a good night's sleep so they, mentally relax the mind so you've got perspective. And there's different therapies applied for each cogs. So it's like going into Bunnings to buy something. You've got so many tools to probably build something, but you just need the one that's specific to you, what you can hold and how you can manage. My husband went to buy a hammer, so he came home with 2 hammers. He's 6'4", so he needs a bigger, stronger hammer. I'm smaller.
Right. So he bought one for you as well.
A smaller one for me.
Was he assuming that you were going to be helping with this project?
If I decided to help, I've got something that suited me. So within these cogs, you need different tools. Everybody is different. And yoga therapy would say, right, where are we at and which cog and what tool can this person actually do rather than imposing and forcing them to do something, because that in itself will cause more stress.
Much of what you've just said in that last answer reminds me just how many benefits you've brought to me, and that you've reminded me about breathing. And I think one of the things when we're stressed, or when I'm stressed anyway, is that we sort of shallow breathe. Mm. And the benefits of breathing deeply, particularly when I do my mindfulness exercise, are great. Mm-hmm.
So breathing deeply, the way that I explain this is that our lungs are built to the capacity of the body. and they need to be fully utilised. And when we shortchange our breathing, we're not breathing into the full capacity of the lungs, we already in our minds will feel shortchanged. So just dropping down with that fullness of breath, we just come to feeling fullness of who we are. So that's kind of from the mental aspect, we can feel rested. Also, it ignites your parasympathetic system, which is your rest and digest. The functionality of the body automatically comes into play.
We're talking today to yoga therapist Vandana Steadman.
I think when you're in the world of yoga therapy, I cannot escape from observing, and the body always shows signs. So under yoga and Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga, the body always shows signs, and it's very, very scientific from a Ayurveda and a yoga perspective. And one of the signs that we may not be looking after ourselves is a dryness of the skin. So from a yoga perspective, it's water. We're not drinking enough water, so therefore we're not fluid enough. There's going to be something caught up. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, it will show that the air element is out of balance. So both yoga and Ayurveda looks at the 5 elements. So I would immediately think, how can I help this person with air? Air would indicate breath. Then, of course, naturally I sat there next to you and I could hear the shortness of breath, which also means that you were in maybe unconscious stress. Unconsciously, we breathed short. And if that's the case, then we actually hold that in the mind is always active, because then we wouldn't be, taking short breath, which would then lead me to think your feet are probably cold and you're not sleeping very well. So these are systematic signs. And that's when I approach, say, look, if you did some breathing, perhaps some of this would just regulate. And, if I was to give you a pose to sleep, I don't think that would have worked. So just putting your feet in hot water is so simple, accessible, without stress. And as I hear, it worked a treat.
In all honesty, I think that for my mental health, that breathing, deeper breathing, incorporating it with my mindfulness exercise in the mornings, it's very stabilizing. It's very balancing, and I think mindfulness has introduced me to that whole concept of acceptance, just accepting how things are. I mean, how can yoga? I guess you've already covered off some of the benefits that yoga can bring to mental health issues.
Well, you see, the breathing aspect, if we looked at the 5 cogs again, the breathing aspect is actually the one that links the body and the mind. So the moment there's instability in the body, whether it's, ability to stand or just have that balancing pose, if we did a balancing pose and we're not quite stable, we can just see physically that possibly the mind is still kind of got so much going on. But that breath actually is the cog that puts the two together. So if we can settle into a deep breath, it'll bring that body and mind straight into alignment. And the breath is also one that will help you step back. You have to take a deep breath to step back.
Right.
So that's where the wisdom part of us comes in. Yeah. Breath is absolutely incredible.
I mean, you've said that you worked in the corporate world. You worked for Microsoft and banking and finance, and then IT. I assume that was with Microsoft. I mean, did you discover yoga because of the threat of burnout in the corporate world?
I'm quite fortunate. We follow a lot of the yoga and Ayurvedic principle from childbirth. I officially got introduced to a meditation technique in 1994, not realising that was step 5, 6 and 7 out of my 8th step. And that really helped me just be me. I know everything might not be perfect, but I was okay just with what I had. And it's got the whole official training got sparked because I wanted to travel and I had the time to study yoga. One of the scriptures says yoga is the restraining the activities of the mind, and then the whole scripture goes into say how. And it was like, wow, I don't need any help. No self-help books. If I just follow the structure, I get there, and it works.
Well, restraining the mind is a real challenge, isn't it? And I think that for me personally, even when I'm doing a mindfulness or meditation exercise, I'm very conscious that the mind is still working. And often the CD that I listen to, I'm reminded to just come back to the breath to try and manage that mind. But what tips would you give our listeners in terms of managing that mind that can so often sort of catastrophize, can't it? And that gets us into strife in terms of our mental health.
Well, when we look at, according to scripture, it's got different aspects of the mind. So it could be oscillating. It goes from here and there, and it is going backwards and forwards. Or it could be scattered. All sorts of things coming in. And the whole idea is to come to a one-pointed focus. What do you need to focus? So I'd say there'd be a couple of things you could do. If you can, for example, just focus on one part of the body. Just get to that, whether it's your big thumb or your feet. Or put a candle in front. You've got an outward focus and just focus on the candle, the wick specifically. Those are kind of the physical taking you from that scattered part to one-pointedness. And all of a sudden your breath will just come down to a nice settling state. Or even chanting. People, talk about chanting, but, they think, it's all EBGB. But chanting is quite rhythmic, and it forces you to have a nice outward controlled breath because you're singing. Yeah, so even that chanting and simple things like a rosary bead, just focusing on a rosary bead, saying a mantra of some kind, these are outwardly focused activities that brings you one-pointedness. It's very hard to meditate with the eyes closed if the mind is disturbed.
How about focusing on breathing?
Breathing is good sometimes. For some people, I find they get more agitated because they know the shallow breathing and they breathe and think, I can't breathe, I can't get into my stomach, I'm not doing it properly, what do I do? So once again, if I go back to the cogs and the different kind of tools, it really depends on the person.
In many ways, Vandana, that's really the goal, isn't it? To turn ourselves on to, wellness, to having a healthier, more mentally wealthy lifestyle.
Oh, absolutely. I think to turn you on is to be on in your awareness. Be aware of what you do, how you do it, where are your tripping points, and often we override them, and we override our own inner state of what I should and shouldn't do.
So tripping points, bags of chips are your tripping point.
Bags of chips, chippies. I do trip over those. But in balance, not a whole big bag.
Right. Oh, in balance. I see. So, well, really, essentially, balance is one of those very important wellness practices.
Well, look, we have a life. We're in this world of culture change. We can do so many things so long as we look at the balance of what we're doing. Okay, sometimes we work so hard and we don't balance it out with some fun activities. Yeah, we got to put things into perspective. Enjoying a bag of chips, that's fine, but balance it out with going for your walk or whatever it might be. So, yoga doesn't say don't do. Yoga says do, enjoy, be aware, and then balance. So the things that I would always ask, and hopefully this will help people, is a good night's sleep. You cannot skip on a good night's sleep. Now that is balance. Water, making sure you have plenty of water, minimum 1.5 to 2 litres is a good balance. What water does, is from a yogic perspective, is flow. Okay, it helps us flow through. All that mental stuff that we get stuck with, we can flow. Somebody we're interacting with flows through that conversation. So it's got a quality from a very energetic perspective. And the last thing is bowel movements. So healthy bowel movements, healthy gut. So whatever practices you need to follow, those are 3 pivotal parts that will start saying, yes, I'm kind of balanced.